So, you might ask the question, how does an Amish girl from Pennsylvania end up being the entrepreneur of the year and the founder of the largest mall-based soft pretzel chain in the world? Well, you're going to find out in a few minutes here. And you might, at some point when you're in a bookstore, want to read this, Twist of Faith, the story of Ann Byler, founder of Auntie Anne's Pretzels, published by Thomas Nelson, right? Mm-hmm. Welcome, Anne. It's quite the story, and I read it every word, and it's very transparent. Here you are, one of the most successful businesswomen in America, whose life is a wreck privately. Who can hardly wait to get away from home on a business trip just to get away from home.
Oh.
Like really, it's really quite a story. So let's start from the beginning. You grew up in Lancaster County, the classic Amish territory in the world, and you were yourself Amish, right?
Correct. I grew up at an Amish farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and that's about as Amish as it gets.
Yeah.
Five brothers and two sisters, and life was simple and very secure in those days. And really my only dream in life was to be a wife and have a bunch of kids someday. That was my goal.
Yeah, and that's a part of your story too, because your husband Jonas wanted to establish a counseling ministry.
Correct.
You wanted to help fund it, so you decided to try selling pretzels. Why? Why pretzels?
Well, pretzels just happened to be a part of the store. I worked for a store in Maryland, and when I managed that store, they had soft pretzels and a few other snack foods. And then 7 months later, I bought my own store in Downingtown, and once again, the store I bought had soft pretzels. So soft pretzels were just part of the plan. I didn't really plan to sell soft pretzels and build this pretzel empire, but God had a plan, and I was along for the ride.
And you in the book you tell a story of how 1 became 2, 2 became 4. I mean, exponential growth. Is you've sold the business subsequently, but there's what, well over 1,000.
There's probably over 1,200 locations around the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
So not just in the U.S., also in Canada,
Correct.
Asia.
Asia, we have in 24 countries.
Wow.
We're in Dubai. We're over in. They're just the Philippines. We're in.
What is it about this pretzel? I mean, did you tweak the recipe? Does it have some special secret element that you're not telling about? Yeah.
Of course, it has a secret ingredient which I can't talk about.
No.
But the recipe itself was actually a mistake. My husband and I were. We went to market one day, and I was really disgusted with the product at the time. And I said to him, I'm going to take the pretzels off the menu. We'll just do pizza and ice cream and the other things we had. And he said, well, before you give up on that, let me try something. So it really should be called Uncle Jonas's pretzels, because it was my husband's persistence that I kept the pretzel on the menu, and we tweaked the recipe. And wow, we did that, and we stood by as the first tray of pretzels came out, our new recipe. It was amazing. And instantly, it was like instantly, the customers, they began to line up for the product. So it's a miracle, and I always say that God created Auntie Anne's as it's definitely a modern day business miracle.
And whenever I'm in, especially U.S. airports, I see your product everywhere, and people still lining up to get it.
Yeah.
I haven't had one yet. I didn't get a free card like Moira did.
Are the lines too long? Or are you just not the kind of a guy that stands in line?
I've never really been into pretzels. Maybe I'll have one of yours. I might be.
Well, my husband says there's 2 things everybody on planet Earth needs before they die. It's God and an Auntie Anne pretzel. So I know you have the God thing worked out. So you better get to a mall and get you a pretzel.
Well, there you go. I didn't know I was missing out on half of life. Now, things were not as rosy as they appeared business-wise for you. Really the defining moment, I think, of your life as I've read your book is the death of your little girl. Tell us about that.
Well, I was living my dream. I had 2 daughters and was planning on a big family at that time. I was just a young bride. I was 26 years old when Angela was our second daughter. And it was September the 8th, 1975, on a beautiful fall Monday morning. Life was grand. I was, I thought, spiritually at the top. I was in this place. My husband and I had built a church, and we were youth pastors, and I can't explain to you where I was spiritually. It was just a very good place. And my philosophy in life at that time was that if you obey God and you do all the right things, and you do the best you can. And I accepted Christ as my Savior when I was just a young girl, and so I was a good girl, and I just assumed, because of what I'd been taught, that life would be good to me. So September the 8th changed all that for me. And Angela was walking out, just walked out of my front door, walked up to see my mom, and which she just lived right next door to me. And between us, there was a barn where my dad made stone siding, and my sister was working the Bobcat that morning, which she did every morning. And Angela was making her little trek, just as she always did. And for whatever reason, my sister did not see her that particular morning, and she backed over her, and Angela was killed instantly. And it changed my life in a way that I never, I was never introduced to any kind of emotional pain, spiritual darkness, depression. I didn't know that existed in people's lives, but it took me down a path of a deep grief and spiritual darkness.
Mm. So you start getting some counseling from a pastor who ends up being a sexual predator and abuses you. 6 years.
That's right.
Now, what I don't understand is how come? Why did you allow this guy to do this to you for 6 years? What was it about him that kept you bonded to him for that period of time?
You know, that question I've been asked a number of times, and I'm almost speechless when it comes to how do I explain that. I can only tell you, if there's anybody in the audience that has experienced abuse of spiritual power or sexual abuse of any kind, they won't ask me that question, because they know exactly what takes place. For me, 6 months after Angela was killed, I was in this spiritual dilemma. I thought, as a Christian, the enemy kept whispering in my ear, you know, if you were as good a Christian as what you say you are, and as what everybody thinks you are, then you wouldn't be feeling this bad. And eventually, I really kind of bought into that, like, okay, that's right. I'm not a victorious Christian. I'm not overcoming this. I should get over this. And so after 6 months of just feeling bad and feeling defeated, I went to see my pastor. And I trusted the man. I thought he was a good man. Now, we were building a very exciting church. It was very vibrant, and it was amazing, right in the middle of Lancaster County. And before I left his office that morning, he seduced me. And I can tell you, as a little Amish girl and as a happy wife previously, I didn't know anything about sexual abuse. I didn't know anything about adultery. I didn't understand. I knew it existed, but I had never experienced that. And so when I walked away from his office that morning, I just decided this was so bad that I would never tell anybody. And up until that point, I really had no secrets in my life. But that was the choice that I made that took me into many, many years of depression and anger and guilt and shame. And I stayed in this relationship because of the choice that I made that day, but also as a perpetrator and as a victim in this situation. It's like your only lifeline is the man. He became my lifeline. And it's hard to explain. And every single time for all those years, I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't right. But the threats and the intimidation and the control and the manipulation in my weakened, vulnerable state, in my state of grief, there was just nothing inside of me that could pull myself.
How did this impact your relationship with your husband, Jonas?
Oh, Jonas and I went from a very good relationship, just very vibrant and happy. I always called our marriage a storybook marriage. And what I began to do, and at that time, if you're familiar with grief, when couples experience the death of a child, very often the wife grieves differently than the husband does. Well, we didn't understand that at that time, had no idea. And so I didn't want to talk to him about Angie because I was afraid that it would make him feel more sad. And he was afraid to talk to me about Angie because he was afraid it would make me feel more sad. And so here we are, kind of putting on the Ritz, just kind of pretending that everything is okay. And deep inside, we're both dying. And what happened was, emotionally, it's like this. It may as well have been the Great Wall of China. It just, over time, we just became so distant that all we could talk about was the weather, and this all happened before Auntie Anne's soft pretzel.
Yeah.
So it was, we were at a very different place at that time. And our marriage was completely broken, completely broken.
Now, in the book, you talk about leaving the pastor, which I found interesting, leaving him. You did leave this dysfunctional relationship. Did that precipitate a change in the atmosphere in terms of your marriage? And did it kind of enable you to get going with this business?
Well, initially when I left the relationship, and I call him the man now, when I left the man, I knew at that point that there was lots of other women involved. I also knew that some of my best friends, and I just got angry because he made everyone believe that they were the only ones, and someday you're going to go off and get married or something. So when I finally had the courage to leave him, there's something rose up inside of me. I know it came about because of a simple confession that I had made to my brother over the telephone. Up until that time, I had never said a word to anyone. So you know, secrets kill you over time. And so it was that confession that gave me overcoming power, and also my sister, I began to talk to her about it. So it was through the fellowship, in a sense, of other people, one to another, that I began to receive this courage and the power to overcome. And over time, then, I didn't tell my husband right away. I thought I was going to be able to get through all of this without ever telling him. And in the meantime, then something happened in the church where I ended up having to tell my husband, which thank God I did at that time. It was very difficult, but I did. And immediately, my husband said to me, "We need to go for counseling."